We're dealing with a vanished civilization that we know nothing about. The whole bloody southern African continent is just covered by these structures, and by the time I finished counting, I realized that there were more than 10 million of these ruins. Everything we've been taught is a lie, and they publish books about it and lie to our children and make them pay exorbitant fees to go to history classes and learn all this crap. It's just insane. Why we are here, what the hell we're doing, and where we come from. What I find is that the study of ancient human history is much older, much stranger than we can imagine. Things are not as they seem, very far removed from what we think they are, and everything is connected. And this is where our modern education system plays such an important role in compartmentalizing subjects and knowledge and information. I not only believe this, I know it to be absolutely true, that everything we've been taught is a lie. It is spectacular, the deception by design that has turned us into a species with amnesia. We are told that the ancients were primitive. All the channels, History Channel, all those, they're still trying to make us believe this. And yet, every year, countless new discoveries of megalithic structures, ancient structures, and every year new discoveries are made of vanished civilizations that we know absolutely nothing about. And obviously the reason why these people could build these structures in ancient times is because they didn't have jobs. They didn't have to get up every morning and go to a stinking job that they hated. So they had all this time, and then they did more of this on the mountaintop, and then one of them got together, and they didn't have board meetings because they didn't have boardrooms, because they didn't have corporations in those days. So you would sit under a tree, and under a tree would decide, hey, let's build these big things called pyramids. And they went into the desert where there were no trees, and they just built these pyramids. And then one of them said, hey, let's build some statues and put them, in a big hall and make people pray and do stuff like that. And then they said, hey, let's build walls and let faces stick out of the walls, and it'll be really scary and spooky for people. And one of them said, hey, you know what we haven't done? We haven't built a big hole in the ground and put stones around it. So they said, okay, well, let's do it. Let's just build a hole in the ground, put some stones. And they were sitting there, so how are we going to remember all this stuff that we're planning to do? So, well, we better invent some writing and an alphabet. And I said, well, we don't have an alphabet. And one of the guys went, I said, hey, that's a letter. Let's just make hundreds of these letters and put them up on the mountain. That'll be the beginning of our alphabet. And one of them said, hey, we don't have a thing that looks like a rocket facing the sky, like the gods, a rocket of the gods. Says, oh, we'll build one of those. So they did build one of those. And then one of them said, hey, you know what we haven't done? We've never carved a whole city out of solid rock. I said, whoa, that's going to be really cool. So they carved a big city out of solid rock. And then they said, we don't have enough pillars and not enough stairs, so they built more stairs and more pillars. And I said, hey, we've never had a floating concrete slab with pillars on top. So I said, oh, that sounds really cool. So they created one. And then I said, but you know what? Apparently, these people in ancient times weren't just brilliant because they could build all this stuff, but they also could apparently hold their breath for very long. And this is why they could build the stuff underwater. And then they went into the jungles and they built weird statues to leave them around because they thought it would be really spooky for people in the future to find them. And they put weird pyramids next to them that make no sense. Why were these things there? Oh, let's just waste. We got time to waste. Let's build them. And then they decided, one of the guys under the tree in a circle was really smart. He said, you know what we haven't never done? We've never taken a stone and hollowed it out. Whoa, that's cool. So they did that. They hollowed out a stone, and they did many, many more, hollowed them out, and then they went and dug a hole in the ground and built like giant Lego blocks and put them on top of each other. And I think this is where Lego actually comes from. And then they got together and built this big thing that when you look at it from the top, it literally makes you look like your eyes are like vibrating at Borobudur, right? It's like moving and while you're looking at it. And they put these giant bells on top, pointing at the sky, so that they could channel the sound of this vibration into the sky. And you know what the most amazing thing is about these guys in ancient times that didn't have jobs? They did this all with ropes, pulleys, hammers, and chisels. One of the important things about this is that all these things that I've just shared with you, pretty much all of these ancient structures and buildings and civilizations are either on the equator or in the northern hemisphere. Very little is ever reported or happened in the southern hemisphere until I started talking about the ancient ruins and civilizations of southern Africa. And this really only came to light about 11 years ago when I started writing about it. Until then, not much was known about it. Adam's calendar has never been heard of, and no one paid much attention to it. So the stone circles, if you haven't seen this before, very simple structures. At first they don't look like much, but you'll notice that each one is completely unique. Sometimes the walls are a little higher than others, but most of the times the walls are very low, not much higher than waist height. And notice the structures, the stone circles, are not just standalone structures. They are connected to other structures around them, and it just goes on and on. Weird shapes, weird structures. If you look in between those two, you'll actually notice that underneath the soil, you can see other structures that are hidden by the soil. And these beautiful flower shapes that play a very important role in all this activity, and the channels that connect them together. This is what the walls look like when you stand on the ground. You see, not really very impressive compared to those megaliths of other parts of the world. However, far more important in the role that they played in many of these instances in some of the research and discoveries that I've been making. What I also find interesting, what boggled my mind at first, is many of these structures, the walls, when you stand inside the stone circle, the walls are not flat. They actually do this. They go all the way, they create this wave around the outer perimeter. Why is it not flat? Why is it not, straight? There's a reason for that. The channels that connect them all together run for hundreds of miles, maybe thousands of miles. No stone circle stands alone. They're all connected with what I call these channels. And then there are other interesting anomalies like these hexagonal honeycomb patterned structures. Just more examples of the size and the vast area that these ruins cover. And then we get the mysterious, unbelievable 450,000 or more square kilometers of agricultural terraces. And this certainly does not suggest that Southern Africa was a sparsely populated part of the world. Somebody built these terraces, and this was not a small number of people. So it obviously took a large number of people over an extended period of time to build these terraces that cover half of bloody Southern Africa, mostly South Africa and Zimbabwe. So this is a critical kind of breakthrough, real physical evidence that we're dealing with a vanished civilization that we know nothing about. And what were they growing? What food were they growing? And who were they feeding? And I've got some really interesting new information, especially from studying the work of Anton Parks. This is a really big aha moment. Anton Parks is a French researcher. His work has mostly been not available in English until very recently. I first came to learn about Anton in 2004 when I was writing Slave Species of God. He was doing research and writing about the Anunnaki and the Sumerian translations. And he is truly, in my opinion, the world's authority on Sumerian language, and all the other languages as being derivatives of the Sumerian language. I recommend that you get his books and study him intensely, and a lot will start making sense for you. He talks about terraces covering the 𝗪𝗪𝗪 and Southern Africa, and where they were growing unimaginable amounts of food, possibly for providing from there the food for the rest of the planet. And this is why we have so many terraces and agricultural activity that dates back a long, long time. What I find fascinating are these agricultural terraces up some very steep mountains that just don't make any sense. So this journey takes us back to the late 1400s when the first Portuguese explorers came around the Cape of Good Hope, today known as Cape Town, on their way to India, and they came on land and they met some of the locals, and they asked them, who built these stone structures here? And the locals told them, we don't know, we didn't build them. Well, modern day historians will argue with you. They'll tell you, we know exactly who built it, when they built it, why they built it, and what it was used for. That's how arrogant they are. And then they publish books about it and lie to our children and make them pay exorbitant fees to go to history classes and learn all this crap. It's just insane. In 1891, Theodore Bent estimated there were about 4,000 of these ruins, from horseback, by the way. And that was already quite a big number. By 1974, Roger Summers recalculated and came up with 20,000 ruins or stone circles in Southern Africa. And that's what I discovered, this information. All right. And this got me really excited. And I thought, man, I live in the land. I'm like Indiana Jones, and I live in the land of Indiana Jones. This is the real stuff. 20,000 ruins. Whoa. Well, hold your horses. Hold on to your hat, because it gets far more exciting. By 2007, when I moved out to 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪, I estimated there at least 100,000 stone ruins, but that was just not even close. And by the way, the retired head of archaeology at Wits University, my university in Johannesburg, that was a number that he threw out at me, and I was astonished, And when I asked him, how many of these ruins do you think there were? And he just said 100,000. I went, well, Rebel, that's great. That's what I think. But if there's 100,000 ruins and we ascribe 10 people per ruin, that's when we still believe that there were dwellings for people and animals, or animals. So if we assign 10 people per ruin, that gives us a population of 1 million people. Yeah, what? And Rebel went, well, then there can't be 100,000 ruins. Just like that. So, well, here's the evidence. What do you mean they can't be? Just because it doesn't make any sense population-wise, it means the history books must be wrong, because here's the physical evidence. But they're not prepared to do that, you see. This is why I speak sometimes quite harshly about mainstream academia. So I started counting. By now you know this story, so I'm going to speed it up. And I counted and I added up and I used as much technology as I could, and I got averages and so forth. And I realized that the whole bloody southern African continent is just covered by these structures. This, by the way, is a new area that I'm going to open up for future tours. This is truly spectacular. It's just mind-blowing. And by the time I finished counting, I realized that there were more than 10 million of these ruins. And that was obviously a shock to the system, because no history books, no archaeology books, no TV show, nothing anywhere has prepared us for this. And at that little moment, that particular moment, I realized that we had just discovered a vanished civilization that we know absolutely nothing about, except what I'm sharing here with you and what I've shared over the last 10 years. And this is why this is such a big deal. It's a big, big deal. Nowhere on earth can you tell or say that there are 10 million stone structures all clustered together. And the question is, what happened to them? And I think this picture tells 1,000 words. The Sumerian King's List tells us a lot of interesting stuff, but one of the important things it tells us, among all the other stuff that you read into it, I'm going to speed up a bit, the most important thing is that all this stuff was going on, and then the flood swept over. So we read about the great flood, not just in the Sumerian text, but in pretty much all ancient cultures, about flood and floods and epochs and events of flooding and destruction, and then the flood swept over. And I think these pictures tell us very clearly that most of the ruins are still covered by sand and soil. And you can see them early in the morning and early afternoon when you look out, when the sun highlights the subtle undulances. Otherwise you can't see them. During the day, you can be walking on top of them and you will not know that you're walking on ancient ruins. I walked these fields that you can see. I've walked all over there. And when I saw these aerial pictures, I was shocked. Couldn't believe that I was walking on ancient ruins not knowing that. And that's what it looks like. Early morning or late afternoon, you can see it very clearly. Important to note, no doors and entrances. You should know this by now if you've seen my presentations before. And this obviously excludes immediately the concept of these being dwellings for people or animals. If there are no doors and entrances, this is not what we're dealing with. And at this immediate moment, it becomes far more interesting and exciting to study. Sometimes concentric circles, all connected by those channels that I mentioned. And the flagship among the ruin, unquestionably Adam's calendar. And this was rediscovered by accident by Johann Heine in 2003. It remains, as far as I know, the oldest working sun calendar found to date. There's no other calendar that still operates and is still accurate, casting a shadow of the sun, and you can still tell the every day of the year reasonably accurately. Even though the place is quite destroyed, you can still tell the day of the year or the passage of the year from the shadow moving across that rock, as you can see there. Zulu shaman 𝗪𝗪𝗦𝗧𝗘 told me in tears that he was initiated in 1937 at this sacred place, and he called it Inzalo Yelanga, or birthplace of the sun, where humanity was created by the gods. And this is a 3D reconstruction of the site. It is aligned with the cardinal points very clearly. You can see from Google shot photographs, Google aerial photographs. It's a circular structure originally, but very old, very badly destroyed. But this is a mystery. Its cardinal point alignments are out by 3¼ degrees, anti-clockwise. And this is a big problem, because the ancients did not make mistakes. Although they didn't have jobs, they didn't make mistakes when they built these ancient structures. And this remains an interesting and an increasingly interesting prospect for us to research. We have a stone man that was removed from the calendar that played a very important role. It's called the stone man. 𝗪𝗪𝗦𝗧𝗘 calls it the clitoris of Mother Earth. And when you realize why he calls it that, it makes a lot of sense. You know, these shamans, they never tell you straight. They always tell you a riddle or a story, and they let you go away to try and figure it out for yourself. You know, just give it to me straight, man. I'm a big boy. I can handle the truth. No, you can't. We have a Horus stone or a Horus bird. It doesn't look like much from the pictures because you can't stand on anything to take it. And if you take a step back, you fall down the edge of the cliff 300 meters. So this is the best you can get until you get a helicopter shot. We have a little sphinx. We have an ancient gravesite, which I believe is connected to 𝗩𝗓𝗦𝗧𝗧, or the son of Enki. And 𝗪𝗓𝗦𝗧𝗧 tells me that a great important king is buried underneath this altar. And we have sufficient evidence to suggest that that is in fact the case. Infrared photography and ground penetrating radar that has indicated that there is something definitely there. We have a statue on the left, as you can see, that suggests it might be a statue of Inanna with a head chopped off, and many other such interesting things at Adam's calendar. We have a connection to Orion, and the three stones right on the edge there, closest to camera, are the ones that line up with the rise of Orion. And when you line it up from Adam's calendar, there's Johann Heine, very early days when he first discovered and started measuring the lineup. You can see the pyramids very clearly in the distance in the valley behind him. Early in the morning is the best time to see the pyramids. And when you lift up those stones at Adam's calendar, they line up perfectly with the pyramids in the valley, the rise of Orion. And the other interesting thing is when you draw a golden spiral from Adam's calendar to the altar that the tree is growing out of, and you continue that golden spiral, it ends right between the pyramids in the valley. Now that'll, statistically, that'll be several million or several billion chances to one that would happen accidentally. And when you connect Adam's calendar through Great Zimbabwe, guess where you land? Right at the Great Pyramid of Giza, all along the 31 degrees longitudinal line. I'm just giving you the skinny of what's really going on here. This is a very important ancient activity. What is all this activity about? Always, obviously, about the gold. And is there any evidence of ancient gold mines? Of course there is. Wherever there's stone circles, there are gold mines. It just doesn't stop. Geological survey in 2005 showed thousands of these old gold mines that I believe were ancient gold mines that were more recently reopened and mined in the late 1800s, early 1900s. This is all near the Leidenburg area, and more than many thousands of mines. I was told by a geologist that was part of that there were 70,000 of these mines. I've actually taken that off this presentation because I don't want to say these things because some guy told me this. But even if he was just partially right and there were just 700 or 7,000 of these mines, it's still a large number of gold mines. But he told me there were 70,000 of these gold mines found by Anglo-American in a major geological search over 5 years. There are mysterious tunnels found, mining tunnels found over the last 100 years. And these tunnels, mysterious tools and things found in them. Platinum slag found in tunnels that run for miles underground. De Beers, I heard from a researcher many years ago that De Beers found a shaft 22,000 feet deep, cut with absolute precision. That suggests new technology that they don't possess. Anglo-American, I know, has a secret file at head office, and this was told me face-to-face over a beer in a pub by the chief geologist for Anglo-American gold mining company. He told me that, I asked him, so do you ever find any ancient tunnels or mines or mine shafts? And he says, yeah, sure. Yeah, of course we do. So I said, wow, that's amazing. And what do you do with these when you find them? He says, no, our instructions are just to cover it up and move right along. He says, but there's a file at head office that has got all the locations of all these mines that we find. I go, cool. I know what we're going to break in. With the next Stone Circle research expedition, we're breaking into Anglo-American head office, and we're looking for file 13. In 2014, I was told by a guy that works in a modern mine that the whole side of one of these tunnels just caved in and opened up a previously unknown huge underground cavern. So they immediately evacuate the mine, close it off, and no one's ever allowed back in there. For many years, I was told this incredible story about a Sheba gold mine in Barberton. This is such a rich gold mine. The gold oozes out of the walls in these veins. It oozes in veins out of the walls. So I thought, okay, well, that's a great story, and it comes from a guy that used to work in the mine. So lo and behold, around January this year, just when we found the fossils, who comes to visit my place, Stone Circle, my little lodge and my restaurant and the museum? An engineer who worked at Sheba Gold Mine in the 80s. And I said to him, do you know anything about this story about the gold oozing in veins? And he said, yeah, I know. He told me the whole story, how he was called from Johannesburg as an expert geologist to come and explain what's going on here. Because why? Because they also discovered a huge underground cavern. And he described it to me when they walked in there. In mining, they called it old works. So it's dangerous. Don't go in there. So that's why they block it off, because it's unsafe. Only the modern mine tunnels are safe. He said they walked in there, him and his associates, and he couldn't believe it. He couldn't see the end of this thing. It was just vast. And then he told me what I was looking for. He said they couldn't understand the technique or the technology that whoever was mining gold they were using, because these veins of gold come out of the ground and they look like roots of trees. And they're like roots of trees that go and they move into the rock. And whoever was mining this had a technique that they could suck the gold out of these roots without damaging the rock around it. They studied these empty channels that went into the rock that were freed of the gold.
If you like this video and you want to see more amazing content, go ahead and check out the next video on our channel.